Welcome back to the Diaries of a Witch podcast. My name is Angelica and today we are going to do a Q&A. I asked for these questions on my Instagram stories, so if you're not already following me on Instagram, go follow me over there. I'm on Instagram at Angelica and you can find the link in the show notes as well. I asked on Instagram, basically like an ask me anything, and the occasion for the AMA for the Q&A today is that I just reached 75,000 followers on Instagram, which I'm super excited about. So thank you to everybody on Instagram. Again, if you're not following me over there, go follow me over there. And yeah, just super special. And I could not do it without y'all. I am so grateful for you guys and for everybody who listens to the show. So if you're listening, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy this Q&A. I will be doing more of these in the future. Let me know if you like this type of an episode. I love answering questions. I really respond super well to questions. I feel like for me, when somebody asks me a question, I'm really easily able to pull out the answer and say to myself, wow, I should talk about that more, or I should make a whole separate video or a whole separate episode about that, because that was a super concise way of explaining that topic. So I really like questions, and I hope you enjoy me answering your questions. So the first question is, what is your favorite phase of the moon to work under? Love this question. So great. I really enjoy the waning moon. I am a natal waning moon. So my moon is technically called a balsamic moon. It is the waning crescent right before it becomes a new moon. So natally, I have that placement. And that part of the moon phase is really associated with things coming to an end, of course, but also wisdom and learning from the past and gaining wisdom of the past. I just love the waning moon. I think that there's something really special to it. And I know a lot of spells will be don't do this during the waning moon, right? Especially if it's a manifestation spell. But I always find myself going to do magic around the time of the waning moon. It's just something that I've noticed about my practice, and it's something that now I kind of intentionally gravitate towards, especially because I have that natal connection to it. But I do work with all of the phases. And if I'm doing a specific spell where I really want to pay attention to the moon phase, especially something around, it really depends what it is, but if it's around manifestation, or if it's around bringing something about, or, planting seeds for something, I'm going to probably gravitate towards the new moon or the waxing crescent. That's another one of my favorite moon cycles. So I guess the answer is, I have so many things I could say about this. Such a good question. I guess the answer is the waning crescent and the waxing crescent, because the waxing crescent is so special too, because it is basically when the moon comes out of this cloak of invisibility, right? And it's when things start to begin, and it's when the seed that was planted around the new moon starts to quicken and starts to sprout. The waning crescent is also associated with this Athenian festival called Numenia, which is sort of this lunar festival celebrating certain deities, and you give you essentially read the Orphic hymns, and you give certain offerings to specific deities for 7 days. And it's sort of this monthly lunar festival called Numenia, which I think is really beautiful. And yeah, I really like the waxing crescent too. I feel like you can do so much on the waxing crescent, because it really symbolizes that something has begun and something is starting. And yeah, it's just so great. So the waxing and the waning crescent, honorary mention to the waxing and waning gibbous, because I really like the waxing and the waning gibbous too. The next question is, what is your easiest non-makeup glamour tip? I honestly don't think you need to wear makeup in order to practice glamour magic. I think that glamour magic and makeup go really well together if you're somebody who already wears them. And the association is pretty obvious, in the sense that glamour magic alters your perception, it alters how people see you, it alters sometimes how you see yourself. It can be this force that you can use to attract or repel things away from you. So makeup is something that you use to in a more corporeal sense, alter the way that you look and alter your perception, perhaps. So you can use it with glamour magic, right? It's sort of a type of glamour magic. However, it's not the whole of glamour magic. There's so much that you can do glamour magic with. And even when I'm, and maybe I differ on this from other people, but even when I'm doing glamour magic that's based in makeup and applying makeup or dressing or skincare or any of those things, I'm still using occult and metaphysical principles that have nothing to do with makeup. So my best tip for how to start practicing glamour magic, or, easy everyday glamour magic that's not makeup related, is to work with the sun and the solar force. So here's the thing with the sun. The sun casts light upon us, and the light that the sun casts is what makes us visible to other people. Light is what creates perception. It's one of the easiest and simplest and most poignant and important laws of glamour magic is using light and using the sun to your advantage. So what I like to do is I just sit in the sun, either in a window during the daytime, or you can go outside. I know it's getting a little chilly out there with the fall and the winter coming up. You can also utilize solar holidays like the solstices or the equinoxes, kazimis and whatnot, like Mercury kazimis, Venus kazimis, where the sun and the other planets are connecting with each other. Or you can just, like I said, sit in the window and allow the sun's rays to fall upon you, and just kind of either using that as a jumping off point for your existing glamour magic spell, or using the energy of the sun to actually fuel the glamour magic. So something that you can do is you can breathe in the energy of the sun. You can do a square breath or the fourfold breath if you're familiar with that idea, or whatever breath work technique that you prefer. And you can breathe in the energy of the sun, hold it for a second in your body, and then let it out. And imagine it kind of enhancing your auric field or creating a force field around you. And then from there, you can think about a perception or something that you want other people to think about you or see you as. If you're about to go in for a job interview or you're about to go on a date, you could say, as you're doing the solar breath work, this person, perceives me as their ideal partner, or this, person is magnetized to me, or this job really wants to hire me and they see me as the ideal candidate. So working with the sun in any way that resonates with you and resonates with your practice. If you work with solar deities, you could bring them in. There's so many ways you can do this. You don't even have to use the physical sun. You could use solar correspondences as well, like frankincense and citrus and that sort of thing. If you want to learn more about glamour magic and easy non-makeup related ways that you can work glamour magic, I would really recommend getting my masterclass called Opportunity Alchemy. I talk about how to use glamour magic to attract success and opportunities to you, and we focus a lot on ways of working this solar type of glamour magic. So I would highly recommend picking that up. I'm going to pop it in the show notes. It's available as just a pre-recorded class. It was a previous live class that we held in May. Opportunity Alchemy has been my best-selling class that I've ever held. I've had the most people come to that class and purchase the recording of it. So it's good stuff. It's a hot topic. It's very much needed in the world of glamour magic, and I hope you pick it up. The next question is how to implement deity work daily when you feel like you have no time. So, I really appreciate this question because I think that this is so many people, and I think it's really relatable, and it's something that I've experienced a lot as well. And first of all, I just want to say that if you experience this, if you were I want to work with my deities, but I feel like I have no time, or I literally have no time, that's okay. And it's so common. It's so normal. I think especially when we're coming from a different religious background, or a religious background that is just separate from paganism, or maybe even a place where you're non-religious and then you kind of come into deity work and you have these experiences, it can take a really long time, like multiple years, to get into a groove with your practice that you feel really good and it just feels like super normal that you're just practicing that and you're working with that. So to anybody that might feel this way, it's okay. And I think just extending some grace to yourself is important. I also think that it's important to note in what ways you're serving the gods that you work with just in your day-to-day life. There's so many things that we do as devotees that are talents that have been given to us by the gods that we don't even really realize might be associated. And we practice these things all the time. So for example, if you are a creative or an artist, you might have gotten that gift from the god that you work with, even if the god isn't necessarily associated with creativity. There might be something a little bit more clear, like, you might work with Mercury or Hermes and you feel really called to working in journalism or mail, like you're a mailman or something. Or you just like feel really called to writing. Anything that you do that involves writing or speaking or even gossiping, during the day could be opportunities to devote that to Mercury or Hermes. Anytime you buy something, anytime you hear somebody speaking something, just you walk past somebody and you hear like a random phrase that they say, that can be a sign from Hermes or Mercury. There's so many ways for us to connect with the gods in our daily lives without changing anything. So that's what I would start first is, does your job have anything to do with the gods that you work with? Do your hobbies have anything to do with the gods that you work with? Even if it's more subtle or more nuanced, like could you sort of associate them with that? Maybe ask them like, hey, is there anything in my day-to-day life that you want me to specifically devote to you? Something that you can also do is create some type of thing that you do every day that becomes a really solid part of your routine that is in devotion to the gods. So for example, I know some people who will wear certain colors or like they'll always have a certain color on as a devotion act to a deity. Or maybe they wear a certain piece of jewelry every day as a devotional act to the deity. I have been called recently to wear my makeup in a certain way. I'll talk more about that in a whole separate episode. But I've been called to do my makeup in a more specific way recently from Hades. And it's been super fascinating because every day I just do my makeup in that way. And, this has been sort of 2 or 3 weeks at this point, and it's really fun. And it's a way of connecting with Hades that I've never done before. And it's also like so built into my routine where it's like, okay, I put on makeup, I, do this specific thing with my makeup that Hades has asked me to do. And that's it, right? And then I'm walking around all day and I've done something devotional. I've created, some type of sacrifice for this deity, and Hades regards it as such. So even though it's not taking 10, 15, 30, 40 minutes, it literally takes 3 seconds and I don't even notice it. The gods are still taking that and going like, wow, you did it, we're connecting. So that's another thing to keep in mind too, is like time to the gods is irrelevant. Like the gods they don't experience time the same way that we do. So if you're saying, okay, I have no time in my day to work with a deity could also say to you like, well, I don't see time and effort in the way that you see time and effort. So maybe instead of thinking that you have to spend 30 minutes a day with your deity, instead of thinking about it in terms of increments of time, think about it in terms of devotional acts or, things that are already built into your life that you can dedicate to them, small things, brief communications. Maybe a moment in your day where you ask a deity for a sign, speaking to deities sort of in your head in terms of saying, hey, Hades, how are you doing? Even if it's in your head, that is deity work, and that doesn't take very much time. And so if you spend 30 minutes in a ritual with a deity, they might regard it similarly to you just briefly saying hi and doing some type of devotional act for them, right? Because they don't see time the way that you do. There could be an argument there of like maybe the amount of effort or the amount of, energy raised for them. But again, like I think repetition, doing things on a daily basis that are simple, or just the repetition and the raised energy of you dedicating going to work to a deity, and thinking about them when you are having a hard time, like that is raised energy. So even if you just do that, and enchant that, I think that that's helpful. Sometimes people find it really difficult to dedicate certain daily acts to the gods. Like they just sort of don't resonate with it feeling like it's a devotional act. And I would challenge that a little bit and saying, well, maybe if you dedicate your workday to your god, who says that they're not receiving that? It might just kind of feel that way on your end. They could be really receiving that as like, wow, this is like really awesome energy that this devotee is raising for me. And I really appreciate being involved in this devotee's daily life. It was, I think it even makes sense historically in terms of like people dedicating certain roles that they played in life to their deities. Roles are really interesting in deity work, right? Roles are associated with aspects and epithets, and gods have these roles and these aspects and these epithets. So when we reflect those things back to them, it is like this living devotion, So I think it can feel at first like, okay, I'm not actually doing anything, but just see how the god responds. And you might even notice that things like work or things like your profession or a role that you play, like with a family member or something, after dedicating that to the deity, you might feel like a big shift in that area of your life. And it actually might feel super helpful that you dedicated that to your god, and you might kind of move forward with it knowing that it is making a difference in your life and in their life. I would also say that if you are the type of person that really kind of like likes to approach your deities in a more ceremonial way, I guess you could say, if you just kind of prefer that or you want to move more in that direction, I would say just carve out one 10-15 minute, maybe even a little bit longer if you want to, segment of time a week. It can be repetitive and you can put it into your schedule, or it can be like whenever I have a free 30 minutes or something, and come up with a really solid but quick ritual that you can do, even if you're a little low energy that week, or even if you're, not like, you don't want to get, you're not feeling like getting out all your ritual tools or something. Like do and come up with something concise, something that can drop you into ritual space super easily, and something that feels very connective. For me, I really like doing a offering with Hades every week, where I sit, I open up ritual space, I give him an offering. I also partake in part of that offering, like I eat part of it. And we have this kind of connective moment where we're like sharing. Sometimes it's a glass of wine, sometimes it's coffee, sometimes it's cake or chocolate or, tea. Sometimes I do tea and I'll like give myself a tea leaf reading from Hades. It's actually really cute. Or like you can do it with coffee grounds as well. I'm terrible at tea leaf readings, but I can do it with Hades. And so I usually, have this moment where we're sitting together and we're eating or consuming something, and it helps to link us together, but it's also really simple. And some weeks I really jazz it up and it's like full ritual, and I'm bathing for an hour beforehand and, putting on my ritual robes and my veil, and I'm doing the whole thing. And some weeks it's like, hey, Hades, here's some coffee. I went down to the coffee shop. I got you a black cup of coffee or a shot of espresso. I brought it back. Let's sit here and just drink the coffee together, right? And it's not quite as ceremonious as it could be. So maybe something like that would be helpful as well. I'm interrupting this episode for a special announcement. I am starting a Patreon on October 1st. It's true. It's happening. I'm starting a Patreon. I'm so excited. The Patreon is going to be for like me and the podcast. So if you like the show, if you want to keep the show going, if you want to support the show, please consider joining Patreon. We're going to have 3 tiers, and there's going to be different perks at each tier, different events, different things that you get, different pieces of content that you receive every month. I will provide the link in the show notes on October 1st when things become available. This episode's coming out earlier than that, but if you're listening after October 1st, check in the show notes, check out Patreon. Special announcement over. Let's get back to the show. This next question is about writing. So I am also a writer. I write fiction, I write poetry, and writing is something that in the next couple of years I really want to talk more about on this channel, on this podcast, on my Instagram. I've been working on a large fiction project, like a novel, for the last 4 years. And it's like getting to a place where it's kind of readable. It's like kind of taking shape. And it is very occulty, very witchy. It has all the Greek gods in it. Like, it is something that I think if you're a listener of the show and a witch, you'll really enjoy it. So that's something that hopefully 2025, 2026, you'll see more of and you'll hear more about. So I really appreciate this person's question around writing. So this question asks, do you write in order or do you prefer to jump around and flesh out scenes separately? So when I'm writing, especially like a novel, right, which I feel like this question is sort of alluding to, I try to write in order chronologically. I also revise in order chronologically. I find it really hard to write like character interiority, which is a thing in writing, especially fiction writing, where you are kind of moving from certain aspects of prose and dialogue into prose that is specific to how your characters are feeling about what's going on in the work and in the scene. And I find it really difficult to write character interiority when I'm jumping around, because when I write chronologically, I'm like, oh yeah, she just experienced this and now she's doing this, and she's already pissed off from the last scene and now she's getting even more angry in this scene, or now she made up with somebody and she's feeling a little bit better. But everything in the book has to sort of be based off of the initial feeling or the previous emotion that she was experiencing. And that's how you get like the character arc, right? So I could probably write the plot non-chronologically and jump around. But the character arc, I find harder to do that non-chronologically, even the plot sometimes. And it's hard when you're jumping around. So I try to write chronologically. I'm currently revising the novel that I've written. And every time I try to jump around and revise different scenes, it's hard. I'm currently like filling in scenes that I have that I need to write that I haven't written, but in order to string everything together from the previous draft, I sort of need to add certain scenes. And it's even been hard to like jump around and add those scenes. I've been having to like rewrite and revise until I get up to that scene. And then I write the missing scene, and then I rewrite and revise until I hit the next missing scene. The next question is, does your spouse have an occult or witchcraft practice? So the answer is no. My husband does not have an occult practice. He's not a witch or a magician. He is very interested in kind of like learning about magic, and astrology. But he's kind of comes about it from this more historical lens. Like, he's just interested in the history of it and how ceremonial magic evolved and astrology sort of evolved. And he helps me a lot with my research. Like, he's a librarian and he is a Sagittarius, so he's always reading, and he does a lot of research in his job anyway, just being a librarian and, working with books and working with people to try to find specific, sources and things that they're looking for. So he's really, really helpful in the sense that he helps me do research. So when I have a topic that I want to do more research on, I'll ask him about it and he'll recommend me a bunch of books. He'll find a bunch of sources for me. Sometimes he will like read certain books and kind of tell me like what the takeaways were. He's like my built-in Sag research historian husband. I love him. But he's not like a practitioner. Like, intellectually interested in magic and reads a lot about it because of me, partially, like because I ask him to assist me with those kinds of things. But I think maybe if we weren't married, he would probably also do that, but just not quite as much. Like I think he has other interests that are a lot more exciting to him than the occult. But I think I've gotten him a little bit more into it in the last couple of years. He was raised Greek Orthodox. He doesn't go to church or doesn't really identify super strongly with being like a practicing Greek Orthodox person. But I think if you asked him, he would still say that he's Greek Orthodox just because that's the religion he was raised in. And that's sort of where I think he still, if he had to pick one, he'd probably like choose that, right? But it never gets in the way of anything. I don't feel like I'm in like a mixed faith marriage. I guess I am technically, but it doesn't feel like we are because he's not at all judgmental about what I do. He's thinks it's so cool. He supports it. He loves it. But I kind of like the fact that he is not a practitioner. I think if he ever wanted to have a practice, I'd be super supportive and that would be really fun and exciting. But I also like that we have our separate interests and we have our separate beliefs. This next question says, tips for someone trying to learn or get into ceremonial magic more? Books, advice, anything? Yeah, so I think that ceremonial magic can be such a mystifying topic for so many people, especially if you come from a witchcraft background or a folk magic background and you start hearing about ceremonial magic stuff and you're kind of like, whoa, what is this? What is going on over here? That's how I experienced it. I don't know how you learned about it or if you're, there in your witchcraft learning yet. But I remember kind of feeling like it was this type of magic that felt very serious and felt very real and like intense and like it worked. Like I remember thinking, oh, ceremonial magic, like that shit works. And that was my way of approaching it when I first learned about this, right? Now I would identify as a ceremonial magician. I love ceremonial magic. I think it's so helpful. I also think it's super impractical. I don't like certain things about it. I don't love certain origins of it. There's so many things I could say. I have like very mixed feelings about ceremonial magic. And I think that a lot of practitioners feel this way. The way that I approach ceremonial magic is more from the worldview that I resonate with, and I kind of use it as a way to go deeper in the things that I'm interested in. So I'm really interested in like astrological ceremonial magic. So I love Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy. I would highly recommend getting a copy of that. I really like the Eric Purdue translation. It's a bit expensive, but it's a great translation. And Eric Purdue actually does like classes and holds different events and things like that using the book and describes certain passages of the book that are a little bit more harder to read or like harder to understand. He'll actually run classes about them. So that's super helpful. I love that there's like a modern person that has translated it that can actually help with the interpretation. I think going to classes, taking classes, experiencing different types of ceremonial magic, because there are so many different types and so many backgrounds of it and so many ancient and more modern texts and medieval texts that could be under the umbrella of ceremonial magic. So going to classes about the topics that you're interested about, sort of under the ceremonial umbrella, is something I would recommend. And there's so many people online that do a variety of different topics on things. There is magic that is associated with certain initiatory traditions within ceremonial magic. So there is like Thelemic magic, which was created and compiled by Aleister Crowley. There's the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. My biggest tip for you is to just get your hands on the grimoires and read them and kind of react to them. And it's okay if you don't understand all of it, but read the grimoire, get the PDF online. Like there's so many random grimoires and there's so many PDFs because they're all in the public domain, and reading through them and reading through the PDFs and just see what naturally comes up for you. And if it's totally going over your head and you don't understand it, that's okay. If you're getting certain parts of it, amazing. If you totally understand it, you're doing great. I mean, you're doing great if you're doing this in general, right? Even if you're not understanding it. I don't understand half the shit that I read sometimes, so don't worry about it. But then after that, you can go and like watch a podcast episode about it or watch a YouTube video about it. I also love Angela's symposium. Angela Puka is amazing. I want to be her. I want to be Angela Puka. She's like a PhD. She's awesome. She talks a ton about ceremonial magic, and she interviews a lot of people to talk about different, more obscure topics within the umbrella. And she also explains and does a really great like academic job explaining these traditions and how they relate to one another. So like pick up a PDF online of the Picatrix or any of the other grimoires, right? There's so many. The red pullet, or is it the black pullet? I can't remember. There's so many. Yeah, just like kind of go through, right? The, Ars Goetia, right? Everybody loves Ars Goetia. It's where we learn about the goetic spirits and demons. And just go through the grimoires and, then watch a video or a podcast episode about that particular grimoire, and you'll have read the text already, so certain things are just going to naturally come to you around it. And then hearing the person talk about it or explain it is going to be really helpful, because you're like, oh, I had no idea what this random section was, and this person is really able to describe it in a way that makes sense and makes sense with the context and the history and who wrote it and how it was compiled. And, it might feel like a little bit more about you learning about history than you feel like you're learning about magic. And I think that that's the learning curve with ceremonial magic, is like, there's so much history and there's so much to decode on your own. And you almost have to like know certain things before you understand things. And that can be really difficult. So just give yourself grace, go with the topics that you're interested in. Like I recommend the Picatrix for anybody who's like interested in astrological magic. That's probably the grimoire that I work the most with. I also love the Greek magical papyri, which is sort of considered like a grimoire. It's part of like the grimoire tradition. It's really old, compiled document that talks about all these different spells from Greece and Egypt and the whole sort of like Mediterranean region at the time. And it is just fascinating. Again, you're typically not going to be like reading it being like, wow, I can't wait to replicate that spell, because they're so difficult. Like, where are you going to get the heart of a rabbit and shit like that, but you're reading through it and you start to understand things about magic or about the deities that they're talking about or evoking, or the angels or the planetary energies, et cetera, that you're like, oh, I get it. Like I know now more about the nature of Persephone through reading the Greek magical papyri, because there's a certain spell where she's associated with all the lunar gods, and all the lunar goddesses, and she's evoked in this spell for XYZ. And now I know, oh, maybe I can work with Persephone for that same thing in my life, right? So I think that that's what's beneficial about reading them. And again, the more you read, the more you'll understand. So I would recommend reading Cornelius Agrippa. I find that he does a really good job of telling you like why things are practical and giving you recipes and procedures that can actually be repeated in a more modern era. I love the Picatrix and the Greek magical papyri. And those are like probably the three main ceremonial texts that I work with. Those are primary texts, of course. I also recommend the book Tarot Talismans by Chick Cicero, who's a Golden Dawn initiate. He's from like the Israel Regardie Golden Dawn lineage. One of my magical mentors, or actually multiple of my magical mentors, I don't really work with them anymore, but worked with them a couple of years ago, are in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And a lot of what I know about ceremonial magic kind of comes from their specific worldview being a part of that initiation tradition. And Cicero, or Chick Cicero, was, an author that was recommended to me. And I do very much find that his books, especially Tarot Talismans, is applicable. It's interesting. You learn a lot about the system. You learn a lot about angelic magic in that book. You learn about the Shem Hemaphorash angels. There's so many cool things in there, and there's connections to tarot. So I find that book in particular is a really good starting book for people who are interested in ceremonial magic, especially coming from tarot or coming from divination or coming from witchcraft, because there's going to be things that you already recognize and symbols and correspondences that you're already familiar with. And now you're layering that on with things like talismanic imagery and planetary magic and things that are very specific to the ceremonial magic traditions in general that you may have never encountered before. This has been such a fun video to film. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you liked the Q&A and the format of the Q&A, please let me know, because I loved it. This was so fun for me. I love hearing your questions, and I want to help demystify magic for you. So if you have anything that is on your mind, you have a question about the occult, or just a question for me, feel free to drop it as a YouTube comment if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on other podcast platforms, you can always drop me an email. I'll have my email down in the show notes. You can also find me on Instagram, follow me over there, and next time I put up an AMA in my stories, you can make sure to drop your question there. Fall is upon us, and there's so many things happening. So right now I have open registration for my Arcana Adepts Pro Tarot Reader Training Program. So if you are somebody who is wanting to start a professional tarot reading practice, if you are an intermediate to an advanced tarot reader and you want to learn more about how to make your readings super accurate, how to do professional client focused readings, how to transition your reading style into a client practice, and how to just build your business, then you need to join Arcana Adepts. This program covers things like advanced tarot techniques, intuitive development techniques, how to make your readings more accurate. But then we're also going to talk about business logistics, very specifically for the industry, for the service-based psychic, tarot, reading, all of the above industry. And we're just going to talk about like how to transition your readings and just from being a hobby reader, a reader who reads for their friends and their family, an intermediate to advanced reader, into somebody who owns a professional tarot reading practice, whether that's part-time or full-time. We start in October, so join us. I'm so excited. We had a couple people join last week, and I'm capping this program at around 13 members. It's a small group program, and I want to kind of keep it small and intimate so everybody can get coaching, and we can talk specifically about your needs for your emerging business, your needs in terms of growing your tarot abilities and becoming a better tarot reader. So join Arcana Adepts. Thanks again for listening to Diaries of a Witch podcast. Have a great rest of your day or night. Bye.